Exciting. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay, so we're gonna get cracking. We've got the wonderful Jac Hughes, who has joined us today, which I'm very, very excited about. Thank you so much, Jac, for coming today and spending the day, not the whole day, spending this next half an hour. I want to get cracking because he does have to shoot at 12:30. So what we'll do is we'll let Jac lead the first 30 minutes, and then for anyone who wants to stay on the call, we can talk a bit more about any questions or any practical stuff. But before we kick off, Jac doesn't actually know this, that I'm going to be doing this. But I have a couple of questions, Jac, to prove that you're human, right? There's a couple of questions. It's just quick fire, 3 questions, just to prove that you're a human being and that we can all trust you. Okay? So you have to answer as quickly as you can. All right.
I'll try. I'll do my best.
Okay, Jac, what was your favorite age?
I'm quite enjoying being 30. I'm only 2 months in, but quite enjoying it at the moment, to be honest.
Congrats, 30.
Yeah.
What's on your nightstand?
The Daily Stoic, which is a book, and there's a guy called Ross Edgley. And he's just, I did it 2 years ago. He swam around Britain, and he's just brought out a book called The Art of Resilience. So they are the 2 things currently on my bedside table. 2 books.
And describe the picture of a moment of an everyday small joy.
I'll do better than that. Hang on.
Oh, that is so much joy. I'll try not to squeal and scare the dog.
So yeah, he's called Reggie, and I never thought I would love a Chihuahua so much, but yeah, he's been with us 8 years, so and he's not going anywhere. So
you are definitely human. Like, you passed the test. I loved it. Thanks.
That's good.
So much, Jac, for joining us. I'm going to hand you over for the next few minutes. I'm just going to on mute. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, hello. First of all, thank you for having me. Jay, it says host disabled attendee screen sharing. If you could disable that.
Hold on.
So in the chat, I'll put it in there again. I've put in a link to a Google Jamboard. Now, the reason I've done this is because if I end up doodling or answering any questions or drawing, you can then, I'll tidy it up and you can export that as a PDF afterwards. So I should be able to share my screen now. Can everyone see that? Probably a good start. Give me a thumbs up. Yeah, cool. So my name's Jac. Used to be in the Navy. Now I'm a Scrum Master, Agile coach. Did do a bit of project management, but wasn't that good at it. So I'm going to run through this Google Jamboard. On page 2, for those of you who are not comfortable with coming off mute or would rather post your question, what you can do is go to page 2 of the Jamboard, create a post-it and write whatever you want. I can just after past, so don't worry too much. What I'm going to do, I'll spend the next 5, 10, 15 minutes tops talking about this sort of canvas I've put together. And I think the real value, to be honest, will be in any Q&A you have. Feel free to keep me on my toes. The harder questions, the better, really. So Agile in general, because that's what I'm here to talk about, there's a lot of misconceptions around what it actually is. So at the top of the canvas here, I need to point out that, there's a few myths around it. So Agile with a capital A was based on software development. Rightly or wrongly, it can be pointed towards other things, but history is important. And it was only ever for Agile software development. That's where the Agile Manifesto comes from. It was the Agile Manifesto for software development. And that's been around since 2001. So although in a lot of bigger organizations, this whole Agile thing It's relatively new. It's nearly 20 years old. And, you know, the foundations of it were formed way before that. But it's not a methodology, okay? Agile in itself isn't a methodology. It's a way of thinking. It's a mindset based on 4 values, 12 principles. And if you go to if you just Google Agile Manifesto, they will come up. And underneath that, underneath sort of the Agile umbrella, which we'll move on to in a minute, is where the frameworks, the methodologies, the tools, the practices come into their own. But Agile in itself isn't a methodology. There's a difference between being Agile and doing Agile. So just to make that point. When I talk about the Agile umbrella, which is what we're talking about here, this is where Scrum, Kanban, Agile project management, I suppose, all come into their own. So all of these tools, practices fall underneath the Agile umbrella, but all of them in this, all of them link to, in one way or another, the Agile values and principles. So the values are things like individuals and interactions over processes and tools, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, responding to change over following a plan, and working software or a working solution over comprehensive documentation. Now, that's not to say that documentation and tools are not important, but if you think about the most successful project programs, pieces of work you've ever been on or worked on, most of the time we do value the individual's interactions. We want to build something that works. We want to respond to change instead of blindly following a plan, and we want to work with the customer as best as we can. I'll tidy these arrows up later. But underneath that Agile umbrella, which is where you've got things like Scrum, which is a framework, which I'll touch on later on, Lean software development, Kanban, which you may have heard on. Again, Kanban was based on manufacturing, not software, and it's the Toyota production line that made that famous. Continuous delivery, crystal clear, DSDM, which is the best way to think about it, although I'll talk about it in a minute, is that it's sort of the Prince 2 version of Agile. And then you've got the scaling frameworks like SAFe, so scaled Agile framework, so scaling it Agile throughout an organization, large scale Scrum, so you've got multiple teams using the Scrum framework. You could make the process up, to be honest, as long as it points towards those values and principles, then you are being more Agile. But Agile with a capital A is a choice, much like Waterfall is. Waterfall isn't a dirty word, but agility is what we're trying to achieve. We want to be a bit more adaptive in our planning. You know, we want to involve the customer throughout the journey. Again, Waterfall isn't a dirty word, but if you think about that sequential process, building a load of requirements up front and then not showing anyone anything for, you know, a year, 18 months is probably not a good idea in a complex world where the customer doesn't really know what they want until they get it. So it's about, if I scroll down here, so if we think about the old Waterfall style, again, nothing wrong with that, I'm just pointing out the differences. Each team, we'd have a copy team, we'd design it, we'd implement it, and we'd analyze it, or, you know, choose a number of those things. It could be design, build, test, deploy, however you want to, you know, whatever project you're on. But each of those teams, each of these teams here, would be on their own. They would be siloed. They would probably never talk to each other. And, you know, they'd chuck work over the fence. And if anything goes wrong, we then have to go back to the start. The point with vertical slices and what Agile teams are trying to achieve is that we want the whole piece of functionality in the shortest amount of time that is possible. So if you think about So if you think about a Victoria sponge cake, right? You've got the cream on the top, you've got the sponge, the jam, sponge, and whatever else, or just think of a cake. If we only delivered the cream, people they're not going to buy it because they'll get sick of the cream. What we're trying to achieve is deliver the whole slice of cake, one piece at a time, where we can give people the opportunity to give feedback to make sure we're baking the right type of cake. There's no point baking building a project, in our case, baking a cake for, for a wedding when the whole wedding party is gluten-free. So if we deliver them one slice, we can get that feedback instead of delivering them the whole lot and everyone becoming ill. I don't know where I pulled that from, but we'll roll with it. You understand what I mean. We're trying to build cross-functional teams, which essentially means we want all of these people. We want the copywriter, we want the designer, we want people who are going to implement it, and we want an analyst all in one team. In large organizations, these people hardly ever speak to each other. And they, like I said before, they chuck work over the fence. If something goes wrong, they don't speak to each other. If you take Agile off the table, we're just talking about things that are good for any team, essentially. And it's a good idea to have all the people we need in one team, not necessarily in one place, but at least in one team. So that's cross-functionality. Another term you might come across is T-shaped individuals. What this means is we will have a deep understanding of many things. So I don't know, if you're a developer or a project manager, you will have a deep understanding of that. But we want the people in our teams to hold on to that depth, but we also want them to have a broad understanding of many things. So we want them to continue, we want that environment of continuous improvement. If someone's off sick, can you at least try and do it? So you could turn this into a comb, I suppose, if you wanted to. Some people have a deep understanding of many things, but at the very basic level, we want people to be T-shaped in that they'll retain that deep understanding of one thing, but we want them to have a broad understanding of many things, which leads me on to. So I'm only going to talk about these two methodologies and one framework because it's a rabbit hole we could go down. If you want to talk about any more, then just give me a shout or just let me know. But the SDM, also known as Agile Project Management, is a more structured it's a structured methodology to deliver projects, IT projects, essentially. And I suppose it can be applied to other things. And it introduces the idea of sprints and it introduces the idea of Scrum, but it's a bit more rigid in terms of, much like Print 2 is, it does give us the step-by-step approach with certain deliverables of what we should have. So for those of you who like the project management role, the SDM sort of gives us that blanket where we still have the stage gates and we still have certain things that other agile frameworks and methodologies may not offer us up. But it does introduce things like iterative development and Scrum, but it just gives us it provides a few more guardrails, if you like. Whereas Scrum, if I scroll across here, I'd be interested to know if any of you have worked like this in the past or at the moment. The Scrum framework is the most popular framework way of working underneath that Agile umbrella. Very, very lightweight for a reason, very relatively simple to understand, quite difficult to master in large organizations, simply because it asks large organizations to take a step back and let go to make sure the teams are empowered to deliver what they want. And I'll talk through it very quickly. So you have a product backlog. So if we're building if I'm a CEO or an entrepreneur and I've got an idea for an app, I am the product owner. The product backlog is everything that is going to make up that product or project, I suppose, but Scrum only speaks in terms of product, so we'll stick with that. This product backlog is ever changing. It's the one source of truth. One product has one product backlog. You then go into an event called sprint planning. So a sprint can be anything up to 30 days. So you can have a 1 week sprint, 2 week sprint, 3 week sprint, 4 week sprint, but no longer than that. Each sprint is considered a project because at the end of it, you should have something that is potentially releasable to the end consumer, no matter how small. At the end, if we're doing a 2 week sprint, we should have something that is potentially releasable to the end consumer. And in sprint planning, as the product owner, I would say, in collaboration with the team, this is what I'm sort of trying to achieve. The team would say, well, we think this, we'll take a subset of the product backlog and put it into the sprint backlog. That's an awful arrow. But anyway, you get the point. We would take a subsection of the product backlog, turn it into the sprint backlog, and that's what we would work on for the next 2 weeks. Every day, we would have something called the daily scrum, which is 15 minutes. It's not a management update. It's a synchronization of work. Going back to the bakery example, I've never made a gluten-free cake before. Can anyone help me out? This is causing me pain. It's a synchronization for the people doing the work, not a management update. At the end of our sprint, we'll have a sprint review where we invite relevant people, talk about the product backlog, talk about the market, show off what we've done. Like I said, at the end, we should have something that's potentially releasable. And then the team will go into something called the sprint retrospective. So if you think of the sprint review as outward facing, the sprint retro is very much inward facing, holding up the mirror to ourselves. We did this really well this sprint, but we didn't do that so well. What actions can we do to take this forward? The main difference is, and again, we could debate this and talk about this all day long, but at a very high level, the main difference is traditional project management is more, task management, deadlines, stakeholder management, team management to an extent, and all of that stuff is fine. I'm not here to say either is right or wrong. I'm just giving the differences. And it depends on personality as well, to be fair. You can have an agile leader in a traditional team, but again, I digress. But agile teams, it's more about servant leadership. So you'll have someone called the Scrum Master if you're using Scrum, and they're not a task manager, a project manager, or a line manager. They are there to help create the best environment for the team to do their best work, because it's the team who decide the what and the how. Essentially, they decide what they can bring in per sprint, and because they're they've got the experience, they decide how they're going to turn those items into stuff that can actually be used. So, and this is where, when I scroll up, there's no right or wrong with this. There's no, there's still a need for traditional project managers depending on the context that you go into. For me, I wasn't very good at it. I didn't like being, I didn't like telling the team what to do, or I preferred the coaching, mentoring, facilitation side of it. And again, that's not right or wrong. That just is what it is. It's just you have to be self-aware in regards to, if you go down the agile route or the Scrum Master route or whatever else, there has to be a willingness and an acceptance that you are probably going to have to step back. You are not there to be the SME for the team, because they are the SMEs. That is what they're paid to do. That's what they're intrinsically motivated to do. So if you're more, I'm trying to think of if you're more of a command and control, you like to be in the nitty gritty of it. There's always going to be a need for project management. But if you're more of a coach, facilitator, mentor, change agent, change manager, trying to influence culture, then there's a space for that as well. Another point, if you are, and again, you guys, I don't really know the context of your role, but if you're moving from something like event management to, say, IT, I'm going to be honest, you can't wing it in regards to the technology. Okay, you have to have some vested interest, or at least some motivation to understand where these developers, where these software engineers are coming from. I'm just going to shut the window. Where these software engineers are coming from, because this is their trade, this is their livelihood, and it can be very easy to be dismissive of that. So if you're moving into the space of IT, you have to, in my opinion, have at least have some sort of buy-in to understand how they develop code, what languages they're using, you know, different ways of working, why they're interested in it in the first place. Because you're going to be asking them to do things that you don't fully understand, and that's going to catch you out. And they will appreciate it a lot more if you take some interest in what they're actually doing. And I suppose that just makes common sense, really. So there's 2 books on the side here. Agile Foundations, again, it's an introduction. You know, it'll talk about the stuff underneath the Agile umbrella in more detail, and the book underneath it is called Working with Coders, and it's a jargon busting terms of reference, and it gives you a platform or a resource to go to brush up on any software development speak for a non-technical sort of person. So they're 2 sort of go-to things that I would recommend. That's this overview sort of done. What I will do is I'll tidy up the painfully inaccurate arrows I've drawn on the screen. I'll stop sharing my screen as well. There was a few questions on the board. Jay, do you want me to just go ahead and start answering them?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, if you're happy to.
Yeah, all right. And if there's any more, then please feel free to shout. I might ask you to explain a bit more if it's not making sense to me as well. As a Scrum Master / project manager, do you have the experience in the market industry, or do you have... So, whoever wrote that, thank you. I would say if you're going into, so a Scrum Master and a product owner, Scrum Master and project manager are 2 different roles. Okay, let's bust that myth straight away. I think I alluded to it, but they're 2 completely different roles, 2 completely.
Hello.
I think my internet went then, didn't it?
Oh, okay, good. I was like, what's going on? Everyone is frozen. Is it me? I think everyone was just like...
So, yeah, back to the question. If you're going to be a Scrum Master, then no. Again, you need to have that motivation to at least understand what the team are building. If you are going to be a product owner, so this is the person who is building the product, or going into a bank and say being a product owner in the banking app, then yes, you would need some sort of experience in developing or working in the banking industry, because you are going to be the person the team are going to go to answer their questions. But as a Scrum Master or an Agile coach, I would say no, but you need to, I'm not going to be as motivated to go and work in, I don't know, William Hill as I would be going to work for a place that builds banking apps, because it just doesn't align with my values and principles. I don't know if that answered the question, but what do you do if project members are not pulling their weight? Does anyone want to expand on that?
So with a more kind of facilitative coaching approach, obviously you're not the manager, and even as a project manager, but particularly as a Scrum Master in the way you've described, you're not their manager. So what do you do if there's somebody on the team not doing their part? Hello.
Yeah, I think I just caught the end of that. Yeah. So for me, it's about making sure that they hold each other to account. So you would have some sort of team agreement with our own values and principles of it. And if they're not, so a team working agreement is an easy thing to do, but it's the following up on it that takes time. So if they're not, if they're not following through on if they're not eating their own dog food, so to speak, it's up to the Scrum Master to facilitate holding up the mirror to themselves. And at the end of the day, Scrum, if you're using the Scrum framework, is quite binary because the development.
We lost him again. There we go. We got you again.
I think it's sorry guys.
It's all right.
This never happens on Google Hangouts.
And we can also feed these questions through in another way after this, so me and Jack can get something together if we need to. Sorry, yeah. Jack.
I'm in no rush. So yeah, it's about holding the mirror up to the team themselves and ensure. Yeah, in Scrum there's no hierarchy, so they either win as a team or they lose as a team. So if someone's not pulling their weight, they're letting the rest of the team down, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think the way you're describing it, Jack, is that you're essentially giving people that sense of accountability and that responsibility just through your approach and your leadership style, that you won't necessarily get the problems that we get in traditional teams where it's just task-based and they're just being told what to do. There's no motivation there. Yeah,
and to be honest, because I'm not overly technical, that they've got no choice but to come up with the solutions themselves because they're not going to get it from me. So yeah.
Can I just ask a quick question? So you've done a lot of comparison between Waterfall and Agile. I've kind of been through a bit of Agile training. I've come from a Waterfall background, but over the more recent years, sort of using the Six Sigma, lean, continuous improvement methodology. So a lot of what you've talked about is almost relevant in that world. Would you have sort of like a brief summary in terms of what's the key difference between that approach and the Agile?
So I think they both, although they're separate, they have overlaps. So reducing waste, looking at flow within the system. I think that, the internet is not working, not my friend today. So although they are separate, they have overlaps, and it's about choosing the right things for your context, really. A question that often comes up: can you be agile in a waterfall environment? Well, if you're talking about capital A agile, then no, because that's a choice. But if we're talking about agility, reducing waste, thinking outside the box, then yes. So there are crossovers, but they are distinctly different, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And in your sort of experience, have you seen where businesses will come? So when I'm looking in the job market, for example, you get businesses where they want to use continuous improvement and the requirements are a lot around the Six Sigma. And then more and more, there's a presence of needing the Agile way of working. Is the key difference being more sort of the IT and digital world wanting to go down the Agile, or is there other factors that businesses prefer to use Agile for?
No, I think it starts off within IT, but that's where it wrongly stops. So for any of this to work, it needs to filter into procurement, the way contracts are written. So if you've got a customer, B2B sort of business, the contracts need to be rewritten in a new way, because when we're saying, because the old project management iron triangle, right? Scope, cost, time. You can still have the cost and the time with an agile project. So we can say, for example, our Scrum team costs us 50 grand a month, and we want them for 3 months. So we know 3 months, 150 grand. It's the scope that has to fit in with that needs to be more fluid, because if we try and be right on all three, as you guys will be aware, more often than not, we're wrong on all three as well. so the myth of, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but yes, it needs to filter throughout the organization, although it does start off most of the time with IT. Shall I try and fire a few more of these off? The technical products, does Agile work? Well, for non-technical, so the values and principles can work for anything. It just depends on the context. You can use Scrum for anything, whether you should or not, again, depends on your context. What questions should we ask of employees in an interview for an Agile position? That's a really good one. What experiments are they running at the moment? Do they value, when was the last time they read the Scrum Guide? What does Agile mean to them? Which is their favorite Agile principle? And you'll get a good answer. You should get some good answers from that. Do you find much resistance or confusion from companies who've never heard of a Scrum Master? How do you win them round? So I wrote a post about this the other day, actually. It's up to leaders and managers, the people who are introducing this stuff, to educate themselves as well. And that's where often it falls over. So again, going back to that interview question, what do you know about Agile? What impact do you think it is going to have? Yes, there is some resistance because it's a more fluffy role for a non-PC way of saying it. But I always say, give me 3 sprints, or give the team 3 sprints. Let's write up a contract for that. And then they have to be, if they're not open to experimentation, then they may not be a company who wants to embrace agility. Is the key point there. We've all seen the post-it notes that are part of a sprint. Are there any online tools that you use to find valuable easy? So Trello, that's probably normally the standard one. It's free. The big one is Jira. That's what most big organizations use. I'm not going to talk about stuff I don't know, but I've only heard good things about Monday.com. Again, I've not used it, so I'm not really aware of it. Google Jamboard, again, relatively easy. Do you find it's more collaborative framework that people tend to pull their weight? Is the ones that do you find? So in its foundations, it's more collaborative because we've got all of the people we need in the room, so to speak. So yes, is there one slide? So the benefit is we're getting feedback from the customer earlier, and so we make sure we're building the right thing. That is, if you take Agile off the table, that is what we're trying to do: deliver small, frequent bits of value earlier, instead of, if you think of the graph, you were only seeing any potential value in a waterfall project once we release it. But in theory, if we're releasing every 2 weeks, we're getting that feedback. How would you, I've literally got 5 more minutes because people are downstairs. How would you recommend introducing Scrum sprints to teams that have never worked this way? How can we best advocate for these principles we're trying to integrate? So you need to invite them on the journey. Like it's very easy, again, for leadership and management to go, you are now Agile, you are now doing Scrum. Brilliant. Why? What's the point? Then they'll probably start using buzzwords like self-organization, but self-organization is very easy to say. You need to start with what you're trying to achieve. People need a goal to self-organize around. Otherwise, brilliant, you want me to go and self-organize? Yeah, what do you mean by that? So it's about involving everyone in the conversation, including leadership, including the most junior person, and trying to, again, it goes back to the 3 sprints. Let's run an experiment. Let's be open and honest. Let's show what the system currently looks like and go from there. Do you often find much resistance or confusion from companies? He's not so cute now, he's growling. Do you often find much resistance or confusion from companies, teams who've never heard of Scrum Master? I think we've done that. I've added these questions. All right.
Yeah. I think we've got them all now, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hopefully they weren't too rushed.
Brilliant.
But yeah, any more? Come here.
Yeah. Oh, look.
Yeah. There's a puppy downstairs, so he's a bit restless. But yeah, any more questions, thoughts, opinions?
And if there are, keep them coming over to either me, or I'll send a link round as well to Jac's LinkedIn in case you want to link up with him on LinkedIn. But if there are
you'll get bored after a while because I'm always on there.
You're quite entertaining. I enjoy it.
Yeah, thanks.
For anyone that wants to stick around and talk a bit more about making the transition from event manager to project manager, please do stick around. But I know, Jac, that you need to shoot off, so please.
Yeah. Go on, Samuel. What were you going to say? Hi,
Jac. So from my point of view, I'm transitioning from the army into project management. I've just recently completed Agile PM and Prince 2. As you say, Agile is very much you either like it or you don't. I pretty much absolutely love the way it all works and how fluid it is. Am I best looking at Scrum Master, because you said yourself the majority of the market is full of Scrum rather than Agile PM?
Do you know what, mate? It's genuinely about what you want to do. Like, I would be naive to point you in either direction, not knowing you personally. If you, it depends. If it depends on the type of role you want, I would say watch a few videos on Scrum. I'm happy to have a chat with you about what the role entails in more detail, but it all depends on what type of job and position you want, what you're intrinsically motivated to do. That's a bit of a wishy-washy answer, but I wouldn't want to put you down a road that you then become unhappy with.
All right, thank you very much.
No worries.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Jac. Thank you for your time.
All right, my pleasure. Wish it could have been longer.
Well, maybe we've been thinking about doing a little conference, so maybe we'll bring you in on that. Yeah,
might be brilliant. But yeah, like I said, Jac Hughes on LinkedIn. Let me know if you want any advice on courses. I think you can tell I'm pretty transparent. I'm not going to sell you something you don't need. Do I run courses? Yes. Do I think you should all come to them? No. It depends on what you want to achieve. They're there. Have a look. If not, I put out tons of free stuff anyway, and you could probably pass any exam by just scrolling through my monotonous feed of saying the same stuff in different ways. But if you want anything, just let me know. It's been a pleasure, and I need to go and deal with this little one.
Thank you.
No worries. Take care, guys.